First Patriots, chapter 3. Freedom and I raced down the hallway to the teacher's lounge. I could still hear the rain coming down outside, but thankfully the lightning and thunder had ceased. When we stopped in front of the door, Freedom said, "I better wait out here and keep guard." "Good idea," I replied. I quickly slipped inside the teacher's lounge. Sure enough, Liberty was standing over a man dressed in colonial clothing who was awkwardly lying on a long orange couch. "Are you sure you're not angry?" Liberty asked timidly. "I assure you I am not mad," I said, forcing a smile. I walked closer to get a better look. The middle-aged man appeared to be unconscious, but his face looked surprisingly peaceful. "Whoever this is, he's a dead ringer from Benjamin Franklin," I said. So which two words mean the same or nearly the same thing? Angry, surprised, unconscious, mad, timidly, or peaceful? 2.
Mad and angry.
Mad and angry. Good job. "You mean he's dead?" Liberty shouted, sounding panicked. "Who's dead?" Tommy said as he walked into the room. Who's that?" The door opened again and Freedom peeked inside. "You should try to keep it down." "Wow, so it really is Benjamin Franklin?" She slipped in all the way and put her back to the door. "Benjamin Franklin?" Tommy exclaimed. "You killed Benjamin Franklin?" "He's dead?" Freedom panicked. No. I don't know. It all happened so fast," Liberty whimpered. "I'm going to prison for killing Franklin, aren't I?" I kneeled down to feel the man's pulse. "He's not dead. But how did he get like this?" "Like I told Freedom," Liberty tried to explain through gasps of anguish and despair. "The lightning flashed, the thunder boomed, and then Mr. Franklin appeared out of nowhere. I think I wished him here." "Sort of like how you can stop time when you concentrate hard enough," Freedom explained. "The shock of traveling through time must have been too much for him and he passed out," Tommy said. "I was close enough to push him onto the couch. He almost collapsed onto the floor. That must count for something, right?" Liberty said pleadingly. "What event happened before Mr. Franklin appeared out of nowhere?" Mr. Revere looked closely at his face. The lightning flashed and the thunder boomed.
Lightning flashed and thunder boomed.
Good.
How did he appear out of nowhere?
For the first time, I looked closely at the face of the supposed Benjamin Franklin. He had wrinkles in his broad forehead and under his eyes. He had a large head, and the little hair he had was blonde but graying. His leather shoes, cream stockings, and sea green breeches and coat were clean but somewhat plain. For the first time, the realization that I was kneeling above the legendary Benjamin Franklin hit me like a ton of bricks. In the first paragraph, it says, "The realization hit me like a ton of bricks." Is this a simile or an idiom?
Simile.
Good. That's the comparison. When you're comparing one thing to another, it's a simile. Good job. "What's in his hand?" Tommy asked. In his left hand were several pieces of parchment with cursive writing on them. I quickly browsed the pages, and after reading several sentences, a sense of panic overcame me. "Oh my," I gasped. "What's wrong?" Freedom asked. "This appears to be notes for a speech. If I'm correct, we may have just snatched away Benjamin Franklin before he could persuade the English government to repeal the Stamp Act." "And that's a bad thing, right?" Liberty worried. "I don't know yet. What I do know is that we have to get him back to the past immediately. Lucky for us, it doesn't appear that he's completely aware of what's happened. Let's try to get Mr. Franklin onto Liberty's saddle. Liberty, move over here so it's easier for us to hoist him up." As Liberty moved his large equine body, someone tried to enter the teacher's lounge. The door pushed open only a few inches, and Freedom pushed back to close it. "Hey! Open the door!" Elizabeth yelled. "I saw Freedom go in there, and I've been listening to your conversation. Let me in." Liberty backed up to the door and helped Freedom keep it shut. "What do we do?" Freedom whispered. "We stick with our plan," I said softly. "Tommy, Freedom, on the count of 3, we lift Mr. Franklin onto the saddle. Liberty, keep that door shut." That I can do, he said firmly. Hey, I said open the door. I can wait out here all day if I have to, Elizabeth threatened. I know I heard Mr. Revere and his circus horse, and I'm pretty sure I heard Tommy's voice too. And from the sound of it, some dead guy named Franklin. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to open the door. After that, I'm bringing my dad, and you know how big he is. He'll have this door open in no time. As Elizabeth finished speaking, we adjusted Franklin's body onto the saddle, and I slipped on behind him. I'll try and be back in a flash, I said. We can't let Elizabeth catch us in here, Tommy said. She already has, Freedom whispered matter-of-factly. No, she hasn't, Tommy replied. Technically, she only saw you come in. She said she heard our voices. Well, then when she only finds you in here, she'll think again, Tommy said, smiling. So you're leaving me here? Freedom whispered with wide eyes. It'll be worse if Elizabeth finds all of us together, Tommy pointed out. If she just finds you, well, just tell her you were sleepwalking and ended up in the teacher's lounge. Sleepwalking? That's a lame excuse. You'll think of something, Tommy said. Fine, just go. I'll figure it out. Do we have enough enough room to time jump in this small room? Tommy asked. I hesitated and said, well, we've never tried it with this much space, but I can do it, Liberty interrupted. I'll do anything to get us out of this mess. I turned to Tommy and said, you'll need to jump right behind us. We're headed to England, 1765. What country are they headed to? England. Tommy raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, cool. Let's go, Liberty, I said. In his loudest whisper, Liberty said, rush, rush, rushing to history. Like before, the circular portal of swirling purple and gold instantly began to open. I held tightly to Liberty's saddle and Benjamin Franklin and said, London, England, 1765. Let's return Benjamin Franklin to the Palace of Westminster. With a hop, skip, and a jump, Liberty bolted up and through our door to the past. As we landed, the jolt caused Benjamin Franklin to stir. Groggily, he began to come to. Quickly, I said, help me get him to the ground. With Tommy's help, we lowered him to a freshly cut lawn. Immediately, I noticed a heavy fog that surrounded us. I couldn't see much, but I could hear the distant sound of horses. Yes, in fact, I could see a faint outline of 2 horses pulling a carriage. Large trees bordered a nearby dirt road that disappeared into a fog bank. Who are you? Benjamin asked as he looked up at me from the grass. Let me help you up, Mr. Franklin, I said with eagerness. I grabbed Ben's hand and pulled him to his feet. He stood, brushed himself off, and said, I'm afraid I'm a bit disoriented. I was riding in a carriage and on my way to give a speech to Parliament, and then he paused. Let me think. Oh, yes, there was a brilliant white light, and for a second I remember staring at a horse. He turned his head and stared at Liberty. He pointed. That horse. Okay, so we had the picture of them helping Benjamin Franklin up off the ground. Okay. I tried to divert his attention and loudly exclaimed, Benjamin Franklin, you really are Benjamin Franklin. It's a great honor, sir. You're a legend, an American hero. And we're standing here with you right now, talking with you. He was a very big deal back then. It's sort of like running into the president. Well, not exactly, but it's a big deal. I don't think we've met, sir, said Benjamin. You seem to know my name, and though I'm flattered by your compliments, I'm afraid I've much more to accomplish in my life to ever be called any of the things you've mentioned. So tell me, what is your name, and who is this fine young man with you? I was giddy at the sight of one of the founding fathers of the United States of America. He was shorter than I was, probably about 5 feet 9 or 10 inches, but he was larger than life, standing right in front of me. He put me at ease as he smiled and waited for my response. When I continued staring, Tommy grabbed my arm and shook it a little. Mr. Revere, this is the part where you introduce yourself? I snapped out of my momentary dream and then realized it wasn't a dream. Benjamin Franklin was actually speaking to me. I took a deep breath and said, "Yes, of course. I'm Rush Revere, history teacher and fellow American." "Ah, yes," said Benjamin. "I thought you might be from the 13 colonies, as your accent sounds a little non-British." In the fourth paragraph, it says, "But he was larger than life." Is this a simile or an idiom?
Idiom.
That one is an idiom. Good job. Good job. And then we have a picture of him with his little fire hat on. The caption says, "Franklin as chief of the Union Fire Company of Philadelphia, the first volunteer fire department in Philadelphia."
The firefighter?
Yeah, he started the first fire department.
Whoa.
Or in Philadelphia anyway. I don't know if it was the first one ever, but it was the first one in Philadelphia. "Oh, yes," I said, laughing, still feeling a little lightheaded. "I'm from the United States of America." "Pardon me? The United what?" asked Benjamin. Tommy whispered, "Mr. Revere, the United States hasn't been invented yet, remember?" "What an interesting thought," Benjamin said. I'll have to try and remember that." I composed myself and said, "It truly is a great honor to meet you. I apologize for sounding like a bumbling idiot." I turned to Tommy and said, "This is one of my students, Tommy." Liberty cleared his throat for attention and sidestepped close. "Oh, and of course, this is Liberty," I said with a little bit of apprehension. I was worried that Liberty's enthusiasm to meet any historical figure, especially one from his own century, might cause him to forget our secret that he was a talking horse. And just like I suspected, he forgot. "It's a great honor, Mr. Franklin. I'm just glad you're not dead," said Liberty with great enthusiasm. "Fascinating," said Benjamin, as he began to closely examine Liberty like he was an exhibit at the Museum of Natural History. "Absolutely fascinating." "Oh, yes," Liberty continued. "You can't begin to know the relief I felt when I found out you were still alive. Whew! Seriously, seeing you standing here brings me a lot of joy. Yes, sir, joy with a capital J." Benjamin looked into Liberty's mouth, and then into his ears and his nose. He finally said, "I am thoroughly impressed. It appears you have the ability to reason and can fluently speak the English language." He turned to me and asked, "Is this an invention of your doing?" What did Benjamin Franklin think Mr. Revere had invented?
A talking horse.
A talking horse, yes. Little crazy there. The next picture is the Library Company of Philadelphia, which was founded by Benjamin Franklin in 1731.
He founded a lot of stuff.
He did. I mean, he really... What is another word that means the same or nearly the same as founded?
Started.
Yeah, started. So he did. He started a lot of things. He founded a lot of things. The next page, we have a flag. The first American political cartoon. Well, actually, it was turned into a flag later. Sorry. Published in 1754 by guess who? Benjamin Franklin in his Pennsylvania Gazette to rally the former colonies against British rule. So what is another word that means the same or nearly the same as published?
Printed.
Printed. So he printed it in his newspaper. Yes.
I know a lot of this stuff because I watched a Broadway about Hamilton.
Oh, yep.
And it was very important about all the different words.
Yep, a lot of that stuff I'm sure was very similar to it. Oh goodness, let me see how far. Oh, there we go. Okay. I gave the best explanation I could. "Yes, well, it was a crazy experiment with lightning," I replied nervously. "Sort of an accident, impossible to duplicate, but I've nurtured Liberty and helped him adjust to his new abilities and intellect." "Well, I must commend you for the scientific success that you have achieved. Truly, I feel very fortunate to have witnessed your accomplishment, but you would be wise to keep Liberty's gift a secret. I am all for sharing the inventions I have discovered, but your discovery is a natural phenomenon. Yes, definitely a wonder to behold." Liberty blushed and said, "Ah, shucks. Thanks, Frankoben. I mean, Benjamin Frank. I mean, Franklin Benjamin. Oh, I mean, Benjamin Franklin, sir. Liberty blushed again. Benjamin stroked Liberty's neck and said, "Yes, Liberty, you are definitely one of a kind. Indeed, most people would pass out in shock at the discovery of a talking horse." "Thank you for your counsel," I said, "and Liberty is usually very careful about letting others know about his gift. Aren't you, Liberty?" "Oh, yes. But I knew you'd understand, Mr. Franklin. I had a good feeling about you." "We're just glad we found you when we did, aren't we, Mr. Revere?" Tommy said. "Definitely, and I'm sure we've taken too much of your time. Certainly you're here in England for a special reason," I hinted. "Oh, I almost forgot," Benjamin said, as he quickly looked at his pocket watch. "What a relief," he sighed. "It appears that time is on my side today." Time is always on our side with Liberty, I thought. "As fellow colonists, you should join me," said Benjamin. "As a colonial representative of Pennsylvania, I've been invited to testify to Parliament about what is happening in the colonies, particularly about the opposition to the Stamp Act. I believe if we cut across this lawn, we can hail a carriage." As we followed Benjamin, I found myself smiling at the mere fact that we were about to experience an important moment in American history. It appeared that the fog was thinning, and in the distance loomed a massive building that looked like a castle fortress. "Mr. Franklin," Tommy said, "are you in trouble? Why do you have to testify? Was there a crime? And what's Parliament? Sorry to ask so many questions." Benjamin laughed and said, "Asking questions is the first step to discovery. Let me answer your questions in reverse. Parliament is the word we use in England for the English government. King George III regularly meets with Parliament, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, to make rules and laws to govern his people. Do the King and Parliament make the rules for the 13 colonies too?" "Yes," said Benjamin, "and that's beginning to be a problem. In fact, many colonists think it's a crime for the king to tax the colonies. In particular, I have come to testify to members of Parliament why the colonies dislike the Stamp Act so much. I remember Mr. Revere mentioned the Stamp Act in our history class." Liberty cleared his throat and said, "Ahem. You know what the Stamp Act is if you'd seen and heard my Stomp Act," Liberty said. "I'd perform it for you now, but it's just not the same without the music." "What is Parliament? A town in England, England's government, or a place to eat ice cream?"
England's government.
England's government.
Not a place to eat ice cream.
I know, that's kind of
Why
silly.
would you bring that up?
"I am still not accustomed to a talking horse," Benjamin said with a chuckle. "Please excuse my laughter. It is simply an expression of surprise and admiration. Are you suggesting that you can also sing?" "Oh boy, let's not encourage him," I cringed. "I'm not prepared to sing my Stamp Act song just yet, but the national anthem is one of my favorites." At once, Liberty began singing, "Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." Benjamin Franklin applauded and said, "I am amazed. And please be assured that your secret is safe with me. However, I am not familiar with this national anthem." "Oh, yes, well, it hasn't caught on just yet." "I think it has potential," Benjamin said. "I especially like the part about the land of the free and home of the brave. In fact, it describes America perfectly. Our forefathers who first settled in America from England are some of the bravest people I have ever read about. Men like William Bradford, for example." "Our class learned all about William Bradford and Miles Standish, who sailed on the Mayflower and settled Plymouth Plantation," Tommy exclaimed. Benjamin nodded and said, "We owe everything to the brave colonists who first came to America to start a land of the free. And now it is my turn to be brave by fighting for the rights of the 13 colonies. We can talk more inside the carriage." Several carriages waited in a row like taxis ready to take people to various destinations in London. Neatly trimmed hedges bordered either side of the road. The grass, the shrubs, the trees were perfectly landscaped. So what was Benjamin Franklin fighting for?
rights of the 13 colonies.
Good job, the 13 colonies. Yep.
I sang the whole national anthem on Memorial Day when we had people over.
Oh,
I sang
good.
the whole national
The rights of farmers in England.
Nope, it's for the 13 colonies.
The rights for the
13 colonies. Okay. It was a sign that England was an established land with centuries of tradition and order. We waited for a carriage to pass before crossing the road. Benjamin called to the coachman of the lead carriage with 2 white horses and said, "Westminster Palace, the House of Commons, please." The footman opened the small door and Benjamin paid him before we stepped up and inside the enclosed interior. 2 purple velvet benches faced each other. Benjamin Franklin sat on one side and Tommy and I sat on the other. I saw Liberty roll his eyes. He was always bothered by the fact that he couldn't fit inside cars or buses and now carriages. As the carriage rumbled down the dirt road, I looked out the side window to see Liberty prancing alongside the horses pulling the carriage. From the looks of it, he had forgotten about riding inside the carriage and was now flirting like he was a stallion. Tommy announced, "Wow, this is really bumpy. This carriage could use a pair of shock absorbers." "I am not familiar with shock absorbers, as you say," said Benjamin. "Oh, it's a device to help smooth out the ride so it's not so bumpy." "Are you an inventor, Tommy?" Benjamin asked. "I like to build things. Do you have any advice for me?" Get ready to check them off. You've got a big checklist here. You're going to check all that apply, so listen carefully. Here we go. Never let uncertainty or fear stop you. If you work hard and think big, you can accomplish anything, especially in a free land like America. There are people that will tell you otherwise. They will say you are not good enough, you are not old enough, you are not smart enough. Balderdash. Do not listen to them. If you have a dream, follow it. Advice. Never let uncertainty or fear stop you. If you work hard, you can accomplish anything. Do not listen to them. And if you have a dream, follow it. Then we have a picture. This is Hanover Square in London in 1787. "Thanks," Tommy said. "I'll remember that. By the way, you said you were fighting for the rights of the colonies? Exactly what rights are you fighting for?" "I'm fighting against this horrible idea called the Stamp Act. Horrible it is, horrible. Last year, the British Prime Minister, George Grenville, passed the Stamp Act, the first direct tax on the American colonies." "I know all about taxes," said Tommy matter-of-factly. "Last year, I saved my money to buy this awesome Lego set and—" I'm sorry to interrupt, but what is a Lego set? "I've been gone from the colonies for a couple of years. Is this some kind of new toy?" "Oh, yeah. They're sort of like building blocks, but they have pieces that connect together and you can build all kinds of things. I have this Lego set with instructions to build the Death Star, you know, from Star Wars, and—" "Tommy has quite the imagination," I said, cutting in, laughing as I nudged Tommy. "Instructions to build a Star of Death for children? Interesting," mused Benjamin. "Anyway," Tommy continued, "I knew the exact price of this Lego set because I wrote it down and looked at it every week. I did lots of chores and worked very hard and saved my money. When I had earned enough, my mom took me to the store to purchase it. I put the exact change on the counter, but the salesperson said it wasn't enough. I'm really good at numbers, so I knew I wasn't wrong. That's when my mom told me that I had forgotten about the tax. I thought, the what? The sales tax, she said. And that's when I learned that we pay a little extra on everything we buy, and that little extra money, the sales tax, goes back to the government." What was the name of the horrible idea Benjamin Franklin was fighting against?
Stamp Act.
Stamp Act, yeah, and capitalize stamp and capitalize act. S-T-A-M-P, capital A-C-T, capitalize both words. And then we have a picture of the three of them. And tell me, Tommy, how did this tax make you feel? Benjamin Franklin asked. Well, at first I didn't think it was fair. But then she said if we all pay a sales tax, then that money goes to help run the city. She said this way everyone can enjoy things like public schools, libraries, highways, and police and fire protection. Once I realized all the places and services I get to enjoy because of all the taxes that are collected, I really didn't mind paying a little bit every time I buy something. You are a very smart boy, Tommy, said Benjamin. But what if the money from those taxes wasn't used to build up your city or bless its citizens? What if your tax money was being used for something you didn't agree with? What if there was no real benefits to anyone at all? Tommy thought for a second. Well, wouldn't that be stealing? That doesn't seem fair. And that's why the colonists are angry, I said. Yes, said Benjamin. The Stamp Act is making the colonists pay extra money on something they didn't vote for. It is a tax that gives nothing back to the community. And we believe it is something that Parliament is doing to undercut our businesses and the success we are having. But why do they call it the Stamp Act? I don't get it, asked Tommy. It is called a Stamp Act because a stamp is placed on all paper products, reminding the colonists that England is still in charge, said Benjamin. You mean I have to pay a tax on anything I buy made from paper? Anything and everything. So why is it called the Stamp Act? Why is it stamp? Because there's a stamp, a real stamp. You know how like you get a stamp on your hand or you get a stamp on your papers? Yeah. It's the same idea. So there's a stamp on all the paper products, and every time you see that stamp on something, you're paying this extra tax to the king and to England.
Or like we put stamps on letters before mail.
It's the same idea. Yep. And so this one won't be graded right away, because you're all going to kind of type it in your own way, and I'll go back and grade it after you're done. So you're going to put this in your own words. Why is it called the Stamp Act? And then you're just going to put, because there is a stamp on all paper things. However you want to word it is fine. I'll go back and I'll know what you mean.
Does it have to be a sentence?
No, you can put a fragment. That's fine. I'll go back and grade it. Just give me your quickest thoughts on that. Okay. Anything and everything. The stamp was put on newspapers, almanacs, pamphlets, legal documents of all kinds, ships' papers, licenses, even playing cards. The act was to be enforced by stamp agents with severe penalties for any who would not pay. However, the colonists are putting a stop to it. Many resist paying the stamp tax. I would not be surprised if someday they rebel against the empire. Tommy laughed. That sounds a lot like Star Wars. Well, I am not familiar with a Star War, said Benjamin, but if the 13 colonies continue to rebel and resist, it is just a matter of time before the empire strikes back. That's exactly what happens in Star Wars, Tommy shouted. And then the rebels are forced to retreat until the return of the Jedi. I had forced a nervous laugh. Jedi, that's Tommy's special word for hero, isn't it, Tommy? Oh, yeah, that's right. I made it up. Jedi heroes like, William Bradford and Miles Standish. All they wanted was freedom. We can't let them down. No worries, Tommy, I said. I saw colonists in Boston burning anything that had a tax stamp on it. And I've read about how the colonists are threatening the stamp agents. I even heard that one agent was tarred and feathered for trying to enforce the Stamp Act. Tommy's eyes went wide and asked, when you say tarred and feathered, do you mean? I'm afraid so, said Benjamin. It is a barbaric and cruel act to slop hot tar on somebody's body and then pour goose feathers on top of them. Oh, wow, this is getting serious. As the carriage slowed, Benjamin looked out the window and said, we have arrived at the Palace of Westminster, and it appears that the fog has lifted. In 1765, England was said to be the most powerful country in the world, and as I peered out the window, I saw that the Palace of Westminster was certainly reflective of that power. The massive stone building, originally built in the Middle Ages, had several tall castle-like structures that overlooked the River Thames. A beautiful courtyard, landscaped with well-trimmed shrubs and trees, welcomed us. The overall sight was breathtaking. The carriage stopped, and as the door opened, Benjamin said, "Follow me, gentlemen. I am honored to have you as my guests." As we exited the carriage, I turned to Tommy and whispered, "This building is where the British lords and lawmakers come to govern. In the United States, the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. is the equivalent." In the courtyard that surrounded the steps leading to two ornately carved doors were dozens of men. I assumed these were the lords and lawmakers of England. They were dressed in the finest waistcoats, vests, and breeches. Most wore white wigs, or their hair was pulled back and tied off with a ribbon. The sound of a large bell rung through the plaza, and the men responded by filing into the palace doors. "Now, let's see if I can get these British gents to repeal the Stamp Act," said Benjamin, as we followed him into the palace. We were the last ones to enter the building, so Liberty took a deep breath and slipped in behind us like he was wearing an invisibility cloak.
Like from Harry Potter.
What was the most powerful country in the world in 1765?
England?
England, yep. And yep, an invisibility cloak, just like Harry Potter, you're right. Good. And that should be the end, yes?
I love those movies.
And then you
I
can
love those
submit.
movies.